and the cost of equity, the return on investment and cost of equity remain constant. The return on investment and cost of equity remain constant. Number three, the retention ratio, what is the retention ratio? The retention ratio is basically that portion of the earnings which are uh, not distributed as dividends. Okay, that part of the earnings which go into retained earnings. So the retention ratio remains unchanged. The retention ratio remains unchanged. Now generally we denote retention ratio by the symbol small b. I'm just writing this down in the chat. Retention ratio is generally denoted by small b, and return on equity is generally denoted by small r. Right? Now, since both of these are assumed to be constant, the growth rate, which is measured as the product of b and r, will also remain constant. Okay, so that would be the fourth assumption. Growth rate in earnings and dividends also remain constant.
What did you just say? So when return on equity and retention ratio is unchanged, that is why is constant. Sorry, sir.
Growth rate will also remain unchanged because growth rate is measured as the product of retention ratio and ROE. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Retention ratio and ROE both are unchanged. Growth rate should also remain unchanged.
Okay, sir.
So that would be the fourth assumption. Fifth assumption, cost of equity is higher than the growth rate. Cost of equity is higher than the growth rate. That is, symbolically we can say that KE is greater than G. Clear? And next assumption, the firm has a perpetual life. That is an indefinite life. It is a going concern. The firm has a perpetual life. And finally, last assumption, corporate taxes do not exist. Clear? Now the basic genesis of the Gordon's model is that this model assumes that the investors are risk averse, right? And they are rational in their approach. So if they are risk averse, clearly they would prefer certain cash flows to uncertain cash flows, right? And in turn they would recognize time value of money. So since the investors are risk averse in nature, they do two things. I'll just share the screen with you. I'll share a write-up. Yes. So since the investors are risk averse in nature, they generally do two things. They put a premium to certain cash flows, and they discount or they penalize uncertain cash flows. Now obviously as time progresses, the cash flows.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sorry.
So you are writing. Hello.
Yes,
Yes, yes, sir. What are these things, sir, which you are writing, sir?
basically I'm explaining the Gordon's model.
Oh, okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay, so just as we said that investors are risk averse, and they generally prefer certain cash flows to uncertain cash flows. So in other words, we could say that certain cash flows are attached with a premium, right? And on the other hand, uncertain cash flows are penalized or discounted. Clear? So as time progresses, as we have seen in case of time value of money, the value of a rupee a year later is worth more than the value of a rupee receivable 5 years later, right? So the investors would prefer current dividends to future dividends, right? This is the very assumption of this model. Now as per this model, the price of a firm, the price of a firm's equity shares, that is, the price of a firm's equity shares is equal to the present value of its dividends. Okay. Now let's say this is t equal to 1 to infinity, because the firm is assumed to have an infinite lifespan. This will be dt, sorry, this will be dt divided by 1 plus ke whole to the power t. Okay, this is dt. Is it clear? So the price, this is the formula for price of a firm's equity shares. Okay,
Okay, sir.
the price of a firm's equity shares is basically calculated as the present value of its dividends. Clear? Now in this case, the dividends can be seen as a stream of cash flows, right? And the dividends grow at a constant rate. So if the dividend for year 1 is D1 and the growth rate is G, then the dividend for the year D2, the dividend for the year 2, that is D2, should be equal to D1 into 1 plus G, isn't it? Likewise, Dn shall be equal to D1 into 1 plus G whole to the power n minus 1. Is this concept clear? So the dividend will go on increasing. So in other words, just a second. The price of the firm's equity shares should be equal to this is what it will come to. Now this takes the, if we expand this summation, then this will take the form of an infinite GP, and finally we would come to this particular formula, that P is equal to D1 divided by K minus G. This is what it will come to ultimately. If you remember the formula for perpetuity that we had done in time value of money, then the present value of perpetuity is measured as the amount of perpetuity divided by the discounting rate, which in this case is what? The discounting rate is KE minus G. Clear? G is the growth rate. So this is the mathematical expression of the Gordon's model of dividend policy. This is better expressed as P naught because this is the current market price of each equity share of the firm. Now you just have to remember this formula. Now D1 can further be expressed as what? D1 can further be expressed as E1 into 1 minus B. Now why do we say that? See, earnings has two parts. One part which is distributed as dividends and another part which is kept as retained earnings by the firm. Okay. Now, if the earnings for year 1 is expressed as E1, then it will have two parts. One part which is distributed as dividends, another part which is retained in its which is retained by the firm for growth purposes. Now, the part now this is the entire earnings E1, right? From this, if we deduct the amount which is retained, then it will be what? E1 into the retention rate. What is the retention rate? As we had defined, the retention rate is the portion of the earnings which are retained in the business instead of being distributed as dividends, right? So if we take E1 common out of this, we get E1 into 1 minus B. So the amount which is left after retaining the earnings is distributed to the shareholders as dividends. So D1 can be written as E1 into 1 minus B. So this value can be substituted in place of this, in place of the numerator. Okay, so this becomes the formula, the mathematical expression of the Gordon's model, this part. Just take down this formula. Now take one problem on Gordon's model.
This is the formula of Gordon's model.
Sorry?
This is the formula of Gordon's
Yes.
model.
Correct.
Okay.
If you are confused with the symbols, please let me know. So P naught is the current market price of each equity share. P naught is the current market price of each equity share. D1 is the dividend for year 1. E1 is the earnings for year 1. B is the retention rate as we have previously discussed. KE is the cost of equity. G is the growth rate in earnings and dividends, which is measured as BR. Okay, that is the product of retention rate and rate of return on investment or rate of return on equity. Clear? Now take one problem.
So D1 is the dividend of each year.
No, for year 1, for the upcoming.
Okay, sir.
This is not dividend for each year because dividend increases by a constant growth rate, right? So for every year the dividend is not same. The growth rate in dividends is same. If it is rupees 100 in year 1 and the growth rate is 5%, then in year 2 it will be 105, then in year 3 it will be 105% of 105, and so on. Take this problem. From the following information relating to a company, determine the market price of a share, using Gordon's model. Let us summarize the information given to us. Total investment in assets rupees 10 lakh. Total investment in assets rupees 10 lakh. Number of shares 50,000. Total earnings rupees 2 lakh. Cost of capital, or we can say cost of equity also, because the assumption is that it is an all equity firm. So cost of equity shall be 16%. Payout ratio, now if B is the retention ratio, then payout ratio is the converse of retention ratio, right? If payout ratio if retention ratio is say 25%, then payout ratio should be 75%, right? So in other words, if for every rupee of earnings 10 paise is retained, then 90 paise shall be the dividend payout, right? So payout ratio can be written as 1 minus B, isn't it? Is there any confusion regarding this part? Retention ratio is B. Okay, say if the retention ratio is 25%, so for every rupee of earnings your retention will be 25 paise, so your payout will be what? 75 paise. That is 1 minus 0.25. So if B is the retention ratio, then 1 minus B should be the payout ratio. Now the payout ratio is given as 40%, or we can write this as 0.4, right? This is the information given to us. We have to find out the market price of each equity share. We will use this formula, right? P naught equal to right, we'll use this formula. Now we will simply plug in the values or replace the values in this place. The earnings for year 1 is given to be 2 lakh. Now E1 means EPS, right? Earnings per share. So earnings per share should be total earnings divided by number of shares, that is 2 lakh divided by 50,000, that is equal to what? Rupees 4, right? 1 minus B is directly given to us, right? 1 minus B is directly given to us, so we can simply substitute 1 minus B by 0.4 as given in this information. The cost of equity is given as 16%, so in decimal terms it is 0.16. and what is the growth rate? As we have discussed before, growth rate is equal to B into R, right? So let us do this somewhere else. G is equal to BR. Now 1 minus B is 0.4. So B should be 1 minus 1 minus B, that is 0.6, isn't it? If 1 minus retention ratio is equal to payout ratio, then also 1 minus payout ratio should be equal to retention ratio, right? So B should be equal to 0.6 multiplied by R. The return on equity shall be equal to, what is the return on equity? How shall we work out the return on equity? Can you tell me?
Sir, we have the total investment in assets and
Correct.
we have the total earnings.
Correct.
So total earnings divided by total investment into 100
Correct.
plus the
Yes.
rate of return.
Yes. So total earnings is 2 lakh. Total investment in assets is 10 lakh. So return on assets, that is 2 lakh divided by 10 lakh, can be taken as return on equity also, because the total investment is funded out of equity, right? So return on equity shall be 2 lakh divided by 10 lakh. That is 0.2. So 0.6 into 0.2, that should come to what? 0.12, right? This should be the value of G. So we will simply substitute this value over here. Okay. So what is the value of P naught?
40.
Yes, the value of P naught is rupees 40. Okay. So this is a simple sum on Gordon's model. Now, if you compare the, as I have told you before, if you compare the assumptions under Gordon's model and the assumptions under Walter's model, they are more or less similar in nature. So clearly the criticisms of Gordon's model are the same as the criticisms of Walter's model. Clear? So I'm not discussing the limitations or criticisms of Gordon's model separately. Let us now move on to Modigliani-Miller model. Just take a 2 minutes break. We'll continue. Now I'll share the limitations. I'll share the assumptions of Modigliani-Miller's model in a separate file with you. But please try and understand this proof is important. Now, as you know, the Modigliani-Miller model is basically an irrelevance model, which means that it proposes that the dividend policy of a firm does not influence the price of its equity shares. Now, as per the Modigliani-Miller model, the current market price of each equity share of a firm is measured as this. Is basically measured as the present value of the firm's dividend at the end of year one and the price of its equity shares at the end of year one. Okay, so if D1 plus P1 is added and discounted to its present value, taking the discounting rate as the cost of equity, we get the current market price of the firm. Now, you might ask me that since I have just said that dividend policy should not affect the market price of the firm's equity shares, isn't it? Then why is this D1 appearing in the formula? Right? This is a pertinent question. Now, as per the Modigliani-Miller model, there is an arbitrage that takes place. Now, what does this mean? Say at the end of year one, we have a certain amount of earnings, right? Now, we can choose to distribute a certain part of the earnings as dividends and retain the other part, right? Now, if dividends are paid, right? Let's say our investment requirement is rupees 10 lakh. Okay, our investment requirement is rupees 10 lakh and we have earnings of rupees 5 lakh. So we can either use 5 lakh entirely. To finance the investment requirement, or what we can do is we can pay out rupees 2 lakh as dividends and 3 lakh will be used to partially make investments, right? And 7 lakh will be managed through external sources of financing. Clear? Now, whenever we rely on external sources of financing, what happens is it pushes down the price of the equity shares because additional risks are undertaken by the firm. So basically there is an offsetting impact, or there is a trade-off between D1 and P1. When D1 goes up, P1 goes down. Clear? Which ultimately causes the numerator value to remain same. So D1 plus P1 remains the same, right? Such is the interaction between D1 and P1. So the value of P0 remains constant in irrespective of the value of D1. This is the theoretical argument behind the MM model. But how do we explain this through a mathematical proof? Now, if the value of P0 is equal to D1 plus P1 by 1 plus K, then if we multiply the market price of each equity share by the number of equity shares, which is denoted by N, we will get the value of the firm. So the value of the firm denoted by V shall be equal to ND1 plus NP1 divided by 1 plus K. Let us take this as equation 1. Right. Now, at the end of year 1, let's say the firm requires an investment of rupees I, capital I. Right. Now, as far as practicable, the firm will try to finance its investment out of its retained earnings, and the balance will be arranged through external sources of finance, which in this case we assume to be raised through sale of new equity shares or issue of new equity shares, right? So I will be financed through two parts. One is through retained earnings, another is through issue of new equity shares. Okay. Now symbolically we can explain it like this. The amount financed through retained earnings can be expressed as E minus ND1. See, E is the earnings of the firm during the year, right? D1 is the amount, D1 is the dividend per share. So the total dividends paid will be dividend per share into number of equity shares, that is ND1. If the total dividends paid is deducted from the total earnings, which is E, we'll get the total retained earnings, which is E minus ND1. This part will be used in financing the new investment requirements, right? Now the balance of investment requirements will be financed through new equity shares, right? Now say the number of new equity shares is N1, right? Now all these equity shares obviously have to be issued at the price that prevails at the end of the year, which is P1, right? So if we just rearrange this equation, then N1 P1 shall be equal to I minus E minus ND1. That is, the amount raised through sale of new equity shares can be expressed as the difference between the investment requirement and the amount financed through retained earnings. Is it clear? Now, using this particular expression, N1 P1 is equal to I minus E plus ND1. Let's say this expression or this equation is serialized as equation 2. We are simply substituting this value of N1 P1 in equation 1. Okay. Now, just notice one thing. In equation 1, we had V is equal to ND1 plus NP1 divided by 1 plus K. What we have done in the first step is that we have simply added the numerator by N1 P1 and then deducted by N1 P1. So basically this expression remains the same, right? Basically, if we strike out these two N1 P1s, then we essentially are left with the same thing. We are still left with this part, right? This and this are essentially the same thing because we have added and deducted the same expression in the numerator. Okay, now if we take P1 common out of this portion, right, we get ND1 plus N plus N1 into P1 minus N1 P1. And in this place of N1 P1, we are simply going to substitute this value, that is I minus E plus ND1. Okay, now what we observe by substituting this value is that ultimately ND1s get cancelled out, and what we are left with is N plus N1 into P1 minus I plus E whole divided by 1 plus K. Now notice one thing in this particular expression, that there is no mention of ND1 or D1 whatsoever, right? So there is no expression of dividend in this formula. So can we say that dividend policy does not impact the value of the firm? Because the formula that we have derived for the value of a firm, right, does not include any dividend expression. So we can say mathematically we have proved that the dividend policy of a firm does not impact the value of the firm. So this is the proof of the Modigliani-Miller model. Any confusion in this proof? You may ask me. Okay. We will solve this sum and illustration 2 will remain as your homework. Okay. Illustration 1 shall be solved by me right now. It is a small sum, and illustration 2 will be solved by you. I'll give you the hint. But these two are the kinds of sums that you can expect from Modigliani-Miller's model. Now, E Limited had 50,000 equity shares of rupees 10 each outstanding on April 1st, 20x1, which means on the first day of the year. The shares are currently quoted at par in the market, which means that the market price P0 P0 is equal to face value. What is the face value in this case? The amount that we see in bracket. The amount,
10.
sorry,
10.
10, correct. Okay, equal to rupees 10. Now we are simply going to use the first formula. P0 is equal to D1 plus P1 whole divided by 1 plus K. What is the requirement in this case? In this case, it has also further been stated that the company now intends to pay a dividend of rupees 2 per share for the current year. So D1 is equal to what? P1 is equal to rupees 2, right? Then it has been stated that it belongs to a risk class which requires a capitalization rate of 15%. So what is this 15%? What is this 15%? Capitalization rate KE. KE is equal to 0.15. Okay. Now we are simply going to use this formula for finding out the price of each equity share at the end of the period. Okay.
Sir, is it 9.50?
Let me see. Yes, it is 9.50. Okay. But that is when dividend is declared. Okay. When dividend is declared. This is case 1. Yeah. So here the value of D1 plus P1 shall be here in the first case we are assuming that dividends are paid. So the value of D1 will be 2 and the value of P1 will be accordingly what? This is unknown, right? This is unknown and KE is 0.15. So we will simply as we know the value of P0 is known to us. The value of P0 is 10, right? We will simply solve this equation to find out the value of P1. The value of P1 will come to 9.5. Yes. Now what if the second assumption, or what if we have the second situation wherein no dividends are paid or no dividends are declared? Then the value of D1 shall be equal to 0, right? D1 shall be equal to 0. Now, accordingly, the value of D will be 0. The value of P1 is unknown. Value of P naught is 10, as we know. So if we solve this equation, what will be the value of P1?
11.5.
11.5. Right. So as you can see, when dividends are increased, right, when dividends are increased from 0 to 2, you will find that the market price of the shares at the end of the period will come down, right, in such a way that the numerator will remain constant. This is what I was saying at the beginning, right, that D1 plus P1 should be equal to should remain constant, right. In the first case, the value of D1 was 2, so 2 plus 9.5 came to what, 11.5. And in the second case, as you can see, the value of D1 is 0, but the value of P1 is 11.5. So 0.0 plus 11.5, that's also equal to 11.5. Okay, so although there is one dividend expression in the numerator will be so the P1 will be adjusted in such a way that the total of the numerator will remain constant, right. So essentially what we can say is dividend policy will not have any impact on the current market price of the firm's equity shares, right. And finally, we are asked to find out the number of equity shares to be newly issued so that the company is able to meet its investment requirement of rupees 2 lakh, assuming that it has a net income of rupees 1,10,000 and it has paid the dividend. So first of all, I is equal to 2 lakh, right. I is equal to 2 lakh. E is equal to 1,10,000. Net income means earnings. Okay, E is equal to 1,10,000. Now, how many new equity shares are required to be issued? We will use this particular formula. N1P1 is equal to, yes, this formula is what we are going to use. Okay. Now, we do not know the value of N1. This is not known to us, but we do know the value of P1 when dividends are paid. When dividends are paid, the value of P1 comes to 9.5, right? As per the first finding, this will be 9.5 equal to I is 2 lakh minus E is 1,10,000 minus N is what? Existing number of equity shares. What is the existing number of equity shares? 50,000. Yes. So 50,000 into D1. What is the value of D1? 2. Right. Dividends are paid. So value of D1 is 2. So just work out this equation. You will find out the value of N1.
One lakh.
This comes to
1,90,000.
1,90,000. Okay. Was this what was asked? Yes. Number of equity shares to be newly issued. Okay. So this is how we solve the.
Sir, this is not the number of equity shares, it's the new investment amount.
No. This is the number of equity shares to be issued. This is the value of N1.
1 lakh. Sir, 1,90,000.
Oh, okay.
It's
Then what is
43,100.
the number? What is the value of N1?
20,000. 20,000.
20,000. Okay. Okay. N1 20,000. So 20,000 shares are required to be issued freshly. Clear? Uh, this is how we solve the first kind of sum. The second kind of sum, this actually looks a little short, but the solution is a bit long. But nothing to worry. Just go through this sum. Let us go through this sum. O Limited has a cost of equity capital of 10% in the market of 10%. The market value of the company, that is the value of V. V is equal to rupees 20 lakh. Right, at the rate rupees 20 per share, which means that P naught is equal to 20. Right. Now, assuming values for I, E, and D as rupees 6,80,000, 1,50,000, and rupees 1 per share, rupee 1 per share, so that under assumptions, the payment of dividend does not affect the value of the firm. So, what you have to do is you have to find out the value. This is the hint I'm giving you. Find out the value of the firm under two sets of assumptions. Under two assumptions. Any idea what these assumptions are? One assumption is that dividends are paid. That is, this value of rupee 1 is paid per share as dividend. And another situation or another assumption where dividends are not paid. And you have to show that the values of the firm are equal under both the assumptions. Right, this is how we will be able to solve this problem. Okay, the payment of dividend does not affect the value of the firm. Clear? This will be your hint. Now tell me, do you want me to solve it or you will do it on your own?
So we can try once.
So we will do.
Yes, please try doing it and submit it in Google Classroom. Okay,
Okay, sir.
I'll post this file in Google Classroom. Do you want me to keep the solutions or delete them?
Keep the solutions.
Okay. Sure. So have you followed the class?
So,
Yes, sir.
Any confusion? Any questions?
no question.
Sharanya wants the recording. Yes, fortunately I have recorded today's class. What would you have done if I hadn't?
Sorry, sir.
What would you have done if I hadn't recorded the class today?
No, sir. No, sir. I've seen that you have been recording. That is why I asked you.
Oh, acha. Okay. Fine, sure.
So how will you give the recording?
Maybe I'll upload it on YouTube. YouTube and give you the link. Just like I have shared the recorded video lectures with you.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Yeah. Any questions?
No, sir.
Do you have a class 11:30 onwards?
Yes, sir.
Okay. See you. Okay, and I'll just
Okay, sir.
Google Classroom, try the second part. Clear? Thank
Yes, sir.
Thank you.